Let's talk about peptide therapy, and we'll just do a quick introduction to this. And remember, we have a full class, 5CU class on peptide therapy. There's a ton of really cool peptides out there. It is such an importantly useful and insanely underused route of therapy, at least in the United States. The reason I really like peptide therapy is because these are natural peptides, or little small chains of amino acids, natural proteins that are found inside every human body. A lot of the peptides that seem to be the most potent are peptides that we have in higher concentrations when we're very young and going through our growing years, and that start to drop as we age. It's the same exact thing that happens with other things like NAD+. NAD+ is one of the major energy sources, NAD+, NADH. We know that NAD+ levels also start to go down after we go through our growing, and at about midlife they really start to go on a downhill slope. If we see these natural substances that have healing capacity that tend to go down in concentration as we age, this is one of the major kind of lines of thinking that people are using when they're studying aging and how to slow down and reverse aging and stuff like that. If we know that these proteins go down in concentration as we age, and we know that they are healing in what they do typically, if we can just amplify the amount of those natural things in our body, wouldn't good things happen? And it just like that, common sense, that makes sense, and that actually tends to happen. If we can just amplify the concentration of some of these proteins, and exercise does this too. It's not surprising, you guys, that if you look at the similarity to what exercise does to these proteins and peptides, exercise amplifies the concentration of these peptides in the same way that doing peptide therapy does. As far as I understand, there's no serious adverse side effects to any of these peptides that I'm going to talk about here or in the class. They're natural proteins in the body. They do have some side effects, obviously. Typically, the most common side effects I see are diarrhea, upset stomach, but just for example, and one that we're not going to talk about here, but a lot of these peptides, there has not been found to be a lethal dose, at least in lab mice and stuff like that. No lethal dose for some of them. And for some of the other ones, the lethal dose is like 20,000 times the amount of the dose that you should be taking. It's not like it's a massive amount. There's a lethal dose of water too. If you drink too much water, you'll die. Very safe. They're natural things that are in our body. We're not screwing around with anything that is not normally in there. This is one of my favorite ones. It's called MOTS-C. MOTS-C. It's a mitochondrial peptide that helps reduce inflammation. It helps improve cardiovascular problems. It's very important for insulin resistance and our glucose processing. Remember, the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. If the mitochondria are dysfunctioning, we're not going to process glucose properly. We're not going to produce ATP properly. Mitochondrial proteins tend to have beneficial effects on the mitochondria if they're the proper proteins. The mitochondria produce somewhere around 23 proteins. The mitochondria, the maternal DNA, the mitochondrial DNA encodes for much fewer proteins than the nuclear DNA. The mitochondrial DNA, as far as we've found so far, encodes for about 23 proteins, and we've found about 13 of them that have been relatively easy to study or to take out and study, and they have really beneficial effects. They basically amplify the health of the mitochondria. If we don't have healthy mitochondria, we don't have health of anything else. It's actually impossible. Remember, the mitochondria, they are what produce our ATP, the main energy unit that our body uses most of the time. If the mitochondria are in hypoxic conditions, they only produce 2 ATPs more or less per molecule of glucose through the citric acid cycle or the electron transport cycle or whatever you want to call it. With oxygen, they produce 36 ATP. That's an 18-fold increase with oxygen or without oxygen. And other things that inhibits the amount of ATPs that are produced aside from oxygen are things like the mitochondrial peptides. MOTS-C is a peptide that is much more concentrated and prominent when we're young and it declines as we age, but there's ways to amplify this, and it just basically makes the mitochondria in the cell healthier and younger and function better, reduces inflammation. It activates pathways like the AMPK pathway, which we talk about in depth in some of the other classes. Again, it improves insulin sensitivity, which is something of huge importance to most of the United States who are overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. And again, these are extremely safe things. The way I look at stuff like this and dry needling and nutrition supplementation, more or less, is if you're doing it thoughtfully and objectively with the proper information, typically the worst thing that's going to happen is it is nothing, or you just may feel a little bit weird, but that's it. The possible best thing that's going to happen is you're going to feel a huge amount better, so why not try it? This stuff is really, really cool. Thymosin beta-4, remember you guys, this is just a brief introduction into peptide therapy. We'll go over this much, much more and way more peptides and these peptides in depth in the peptide class. Thymosin beta-4 is a thymus hormone, the thymus gland in the chest here. It's a much more prominent gland when we're young, and it starts to shrink as we age. The thymus gland produces a whole lot of peptides that are very, very important for proper growth and maturation and neurodevelopment and all this stuff. If we can amplify the amount of these peptides that we have when we're younger, when we're older, they have very, very beneficial healing longevity effects on us. One of the things that I always talk about when I teach my dry needling classes is we need to think about restoring as much energy to the autonomic nervous system as we can through targeting the autonomic nervous system itself and decreasing tissue pathology throughout the body to reoxygenate the mitochondria, decrease sympathetic autonomic hyperactivity. And one of the things that happens through that is we decrease body-wide inflammation. Chronic autonomic sympathetic hyperactivity is something that the vast majority of people suffer from. It's the underlying cause of, or it's at least associated with, a huge percentage of autoimmune and idiopathic diseases. And some of the things that you see studied in the literature, you see across all fields of literature. There's a handful of cytokines and other peptides that are really, really prominent when people have chronic high levels of inflammation, which decreases your mental capacity, it decreases your mental function, it will lead to mental health impairments. Some of the major ones that people talk about all the time are TNF-A, or tumor necrosis factor alpha, IL-1, interleukin 6, or interleukin 1, interleukin 6, CRP, C-reactive protein, that's a liver one. And then there's other anti-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin 10 and interleukin 17 and some of the other ones. Just to put it very, very simply, thymosin beta-4 has a bunch of homeostatic effects on the body and the brain. It helps improve hair loss, stimulates hair growth, improves angiogenesis. It's very, very helpful for a bunch of different things. These are some common peptides that people are using all over the world right now. Athletes are using them. They're just not spoken about in the mainstream medicine, you guys, because what you need to understand is that for the pharmaceutical companies to make money off of any of this stuff, they need to change the molecular structure of natural peptides a certain amount so they could patent it. That's what they did with Ozempic. Semaglutide is the natural peptide. Ozempic is like 50 times stronger. So they changed it and they were able to patent it. The way that this works is anything that works super good and that is safe, the FDA and the USDA and all these criminal associations come out and say that it's dangerous for you. The FDA just admitted that they covered up the fact that ivermectin was very, very useful against COVID. They just admitted this. They just settled a huge lawsuit on this. It's the same thing with these peptides. Ivermectin is a Nobel Prize winning drug. It saved my life when I had malaria in Central America. It's been used on billions of people. The reason that the pharmaceutical companies were petrified of people realizing that ivermectin was super effective against a ton of different things, and people all over the world take it every day for things like river blindness and malaria and all sorts of stuff, is that ivermectin was off patent. It's super cheap, it's super safe, it's one of the safest drugs ever invented, or it's one of the safest things ever created, and it's based off of a natural molecule. Just an amazingly effective thing. It's the same thing as these peptides. If the pharmaceutical companies haven't derived a way to change the thing enough where they can patent it and make it super expensive. They'll tell you it's dangerous no matter how effective and safe it is, because they can't make money off of it. Remember this, the things that the FDA and the CDC and all these public health agencies, the only thing the people that are running these things care about is money and their own personal interest. Health is not in the equation here at all. It's frustrating, but there's so many cool things out there, and these are accessible treatments that you can either purchase yourself, or you can go to the proper functional medicine doctors that know about this stuff and they'll do it for you. It's really, really awesome stuff. So that's just a brief introduction to peptides, you guys. And we have tons more peptides in the peptide classes. We go over these ones in depth, but just a brief introduction into the possible things out there that can really, really improve health. I just read a new article about one of these peptides for completely resolving cases of MS, multiple sclerosis, showing huge improvements with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. A lot of the neurodegenerative disorders are secondary to chronic energy deficiency in the body. If the mitochondria are dysfunctioning, we're not producing enough ATPs for a long enough time, our body does not have enough of a well of reserve energy or enough of a gas tank to function. It starts to just stop doing stuff, and that just leads to a cascade of loss of homeostasis and dysfunction. If you can properly regulate and give your body what it needs at the base level, like the base elements that the mitochondria need to function well and to produce enough ATPs, amazing, seemingly miraculous things happen. Because again, neurodegenerative diseases like MS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, they're considered idiopathic diseases, or we don't know why they happen. But we do know why they happen. The vast majority of those diseases come from a bunch of different conglomerations of reasons for different individuals, but the overall thing is the sympathetic autonomic nervous system has been cranked up for too long, secondary to chronic things like eating bad food, stress, not exercising, all this stuff. And at a certain point, our nervous system and our immune system just says, nope, we can't do it anymore, and something goes downhill fast. So that's how the body works. Like, most people wouldn't know they had cancer until there was stage 4, unless we had somewhat regular checkups or you had the understanding of how to tell for certain things, because our body has an amazing ability to mask things for a long time until it totally runs out of the very last bit of energy it has, and then it just goes off a cliff. So these peptides have been shown in tons and tons of really, really neat studies, and I know lots of people that use them, doctors and some of my pro athlete friends, with huge success. I've never heard anything really negative about them. So this is a really, really big area that I really try to educate all of my medical practitioner students that I teach on these other things that are available that are cheap, safe, and effective.